We are in 2020. Africa is hotter than ever. No pun intended. What are the great opportunities out there, you must be wondering? So instead of simply listing out my top 10, for each and every opportunity, I'm going to tackle them from 5 different angles. Number 1, why did I pick those as top opportunities for 2020 to invest in Africa? Number 2, what are some trends and data around that opportunity? Number 3, what are some examples or how you can implement that opportunity so you turn that opportunity into a profitable business? Number 4, basically going to be around all of the elements you need to consider in order to come up with the startup costs, right? And the last but not least is for each and every opportunity, there is a risk, there is a challenge. So I'm just going to touch on some of the aspects to watch out if you wanted to capitalize on that opportunity. Hey, what's up? My name is Eris. Welcome to Diaspora Achievers, where I take the African diaspora on a journey to investing in Africa, financial freedom, leveraging entrepreneurship. And if this is something that excites you and the journey that you want to be part of, here are your first 2 steps. Number 1, click on the subscribe button below as well as the notification bell so that you get notified every single time there's a new video, because each and every video that is released brings you closer to your goal. Number 2, in the description below there is going to be a link for a free ebook that I put together for you that will help you from 2 perspectives. Number 1, it would help you understand why entrepreneurship is the best way for you to invest in Africa and make a difference and get financial freedom for yourself and your loved ones. Let's get into it. So my first profitable business opportunity for you in Africa in 2020 is in the agriculture sector. So you've probably heard by now that that's really where our focus, the diaspora, and actually any African really should be on. My personal reason are, number 1, you acquire land. So assuming you go with a purchase, you do acquire land. Number 2, you create an ecosystem where you could essentially grow your crop, transform your crop, or process it to whatever you want it to become, or actually sell it. But if you go with processing it, then you add value and it gets you into a completely different space. Number 4, you basically create employment. So an ecosystem where you can go into rural places, create employment there and change the dynamics. Now, in terms of data and trends, when it comes to agriculture, there are a couple of things you need to consider. Number 1, the population is growing drastically. Between 2019 and 2050, the population is to double from $1.3 billion to give or take $2.4 billion. People need to be fed, right? Number 2, and that's the most critical to me, is the fact that Africa as a continent import a lot of food. Let me get into some numbers here. Between 2017 and 2025, so it's a span of pretty much 8 years, the imports of food is going to go from 35 billions to 110 billions, right? So imagine, 1, there's a lot of people on the continent. 2, there's not enough people, enough food to feed the population to the point where we need to import the actual food. That's crazy. Number 3, the arable lands are all over the place. 60% of the arable lands in the world are actually based in Africa, and most of it is not farmed, right? So the land is just there doing its thing. Nobody's taking advantage of it. Nobody's leveraging it to feed the population, right? To the point where you have foreign countries like China, for example, who are coming into the continent of Africa, multiple countries, and purchasing land. It could be a long-term lease, 100, 200 years, whatever the case may be, or literally buying it right out. So what that means is that we don't even appreciate and value our own land. So that's an opportunity for us to say, hey, the demand is there, no question about it, because the population is growing, so much so that the government import the food and the land is there, nobody's using it, so much so that foreign countries are actually coming in and purchasing the land and leveraging the land. Now, in terms of examples, or in terms of how you can apply that opportunity or turn that opportunity into a profitable model. There's so many examples. There's so many crops you can go for, palm oil, plantains, cassava, onions, tomato. I mean, just think about it, right? Just grab whatever you want to think about and go ahead and make it happen. Now, that's also a challenge, but I'll get to that later. When it comes to myself, when I started my farm, I basically went through a process of elimination, because me coming in from overseas or from the diaspora, I had some ideas or some thoughts of what I wanted to do. But really, when you get to on the ground and really start talking to people and trying to do some market research and trying to just look around, you realize that, hey, the thoughts that you had from over there, which was a lot of transformation, a lot of processing and all that stuff, there's not even a need for it there. People are just trying to eat, you know what I mean? Now, last but not least, when it comes to agriculture and farming as an opportunity, is a challenge. I probably see two major challenges. One, around education. Farming is not a game. Yeah, you know what I mean? Especially if you want to do it the right way, not just like our parents or grandparents were doing, but if you want to be more respectful of the soil, if you want to be more efficient with your work, you need to educate yourself or work with people who are educated and know what they're doing. So that's a big one, right? What size of land do you need, what kind of crop you need, how you need to kill, use pesticide if you want to go that route, what kind of, bunch of things you need to consider. For me, it was a learning process, because out here, I had no idea what agriculture was about whatsoever. So I had to go back home, hire people, work with some people, and then be really curious about it. See how we can leverage learning from here, bring it back there, and see how we can leverage learning and knowledge that was local, right? The second challenge is, what are we going to invest in? What kind of crop? Because there are fruits, there's, cassava. There's like so many crops anyways, right? So the idea, which one are we going to go for and which one are we going to select? Second profitable business opportunity in Africa in 2020 is real estate, but real estate for the middle class, right? The reason why I picked this industry and this niche, i.e. the middle class, is that it is growing. Wherever you go on the continent, you see a middle class that's local, that's more educated, that's creating wealth. You see folks coming from overseas and looking for a certain standard of living in terms of accommodation, in terms of where they want to live at. That's the reason why I picked the niche of middle class in real estate. They do have the means to pay for the standard that they require, but sometimes in a lot of countries, in a lot of countries, there is not a market for middle class. It's either low class or entry level, or the 1%, right? The middle class is not so well served, or if it is, there's not enough of real estate options for who are in the middle class. I basically touched on the trends, really. The population is growing. The middle class is also growing from the fact that people are educated, people are getting more revenues, people are coming from overseas. So that increases the middle class to the point where they have the means and they're looking for a better living conditions, essentially. In terms of example, what you could do, there's a couple of options you can go about it, right? You can go on the dev side, where you turn out being a developer, where you actually purchase land or essentially develop, houses and buildings and condominiums, apartments, etc. On the other side, you can essentially go on to become a lender, right? First, you're a developer. Second, you're a landlord. So as a landlord, what you end up doing is essentially getting your property and renting it out, right? You can rent it out for, short-term rental, long-term rental, whatever the case may be, depending on where you are on the continent. Certain places attract a lot more tourists than others, right? If you're in an area or in a city where there are a lot of tourists, you can turn your place into a short-term rental. That's a lot more revenue, right? Coming to you. Now, the other options as well is to look at, on the dev side, You become a developer where you build a property, you build a house, you build a condo, and then you go out and sell it essentially, right? The profit margin obviously is a lot bigger on this side versus if you were to be a landlord. Now, on the flip side of things, as a developer, the business is really capital intensive. The access to credit is really limited in most countries, so you need to have a lot of cash or connection depending on the country and the situation. You need to build everything from scratch. So what I would recommend is probably either start small with a small property or a small building or something small, or mitigate your risk by finding partners, right? You get your partners, you guys sit together and then share the risk. Profitable business opportunities in Africa in 2020. Number 3 is to provide a relevant and practical education. What I mean by that is an education whereby at the end of the cycle, at the end of the curriculum, the student will be able to go in and actually make some impact, create value for their customer, their client, and get paid for it. Not a long-term theoretical training where they'll have a lot of knowledge but nothing practical. The reason why this is an obvious one to me is because we have a lot of trained PhDs and masters and all of that stuff back home and even over here in the diaspora, but in terms of practical experience that change people's lives, it's not necessarily the case. And then the population in Africa is so young that there are avenues today to go in and train them so they can impact their environment and their community right away, business community or not, right away to the point where they can get paid for it. In terms of data trend, the one that I want to share with you is the fact that about a year or so, 12 of the largest companies in the world really decided not to require graduate degrees or university degrees to hire you. So Google is one of them, Apple is one of them. So think about it as if you're good at what you are, you have proven talent, not potential talent that you actually turn into value, they will hire you and not ask for your master's or your engineering degree or whatever the case may be, right? Obviously, this is only for certain type of areas or certain type of fields, but also I'm not saying at all or suggesting at all that university or school is not a great thing. Like I hear a lot of people say out there that, university and school is useless. That's, in my humble opinion, it makes zero sense. I'll get to that in another video. In terms of examples, the type of training that you can provide will be around programming, will be building applications, for example, will be around agriculture. Going and training folks who want to get into agriculture, or even folks who've been in agriculture but who are not using the best or the most modern or the most efficient method to run their farm. And then another area, for example, could be around marketing and sales. Really, this is a big deal because from my experience, from what I've seen, people are really good with coming up with ideas, but not necessarily ideas that are easy to sell or easy to buy. What I'm saying is that, yeah, you could have a great idea in your head, but if it's in your head, that's not gonna make you money. That's not gonna grow your business. But if you're able to figure out how your idea solve a practical problem, that's a big thing. And 2, how you can convince the seller that my solution, product or service is going to help you be better at whatever you want to be at, or whatever you want to be. No matter if it's it's a large business, small business, or personal, whatever the case may be, ability to sell is always a training that is valuable, maybe the most valuable of them all. In terms of startup costs, outside of your training, assuming you train, assuming like you have those skill sets, really what you want to look at is 2 ways to go about it, right? 1, you can basically spend $0 and really focus everything online. All you need essentially, I guess, is a connection and the computer, right? You do everything online, you're training online, you acquire your customers online. Another way to look at it, for example, is also to, if you want to do it physically, all you have to do is rent a venue, right? Either rent, buy, or whatever. You have a venue you go to. It could be as high as a hotel, conference room, or hall, or as low as, a room in a library. I mean, I don't know if there are lots of libraries back home, but you know what I mean anyways, right? Now, in terms of what to watch out for, I touched on it earlier, is to make sure that at the end of your program, your students will essentially be able to be up and running. You know what I'm saying? If you can ideally have a program whereby during your courses or during your classes, the student building up their own portfolio, so that at the end of your program, they can have the portfolio and go knock at somebody's door and say, hey, I want to help you build a mobile application, and this is what I've done. These are the apps that I've done in the past, and those apps would have been done in your training, right? Which comes back to what we were saying earlier, whereby these guys are up and running as soon as they are completed with your program, with your course. Number 4, in terms of profitable business opportunities in Africa in 2020, is going to be digital archiving. Let me explain myself here. In a lot of countries in Africa, the processes, no matter if they are with government agencies or in the private sector, are not clear. Practical example, a couple years ago I moved back. I had a good situation, so I had to move back home to Cameroon, and I was debating, should I ship my car back or should I get a car down there? The only reason why I did not do that was that I could not plan in advance. I didn't know the different steps, the different process and procedures, the regulation, and more importantly, the cost, right? So I was like, you know what? Let me not even think about it. So, and that applies to a lot of different sectors. Obviously, if you were in Kigali, Rwanda, you're probably, obviously, if you're in Rwanda, you don't have that kind of problem. Other countries, I'm not sure that things are set up as clean and cut as in Rwanda. So from a business perspective, if you are able to put together a clear process and procedure for each and every process, or at least the top ones, right? Registering your car, importing your vehicle, purchasing a house or registering a house, opening a business. If you could basically say, okay, these are the different steps, this is how much it costs, this is who you talk to, that will position you as an expert in the field. You can actually turn that into revenue from two perspectives. You can sell that process to somebody else and they can use it basically, or you can basically look for your own client, people like me who are basically looking to purchase land, purchase a car or import a car into the country. They don't even know where to start. You position yourself, hey, you basically tell them, this is the information on how you import your car, how much it would cost you. And by the way, I can help you with that. Because you would have provided me with some free information that's so valuable to me, that will position you as somebody that I could trust, as somebody that I may want to do business with. But that's a different discussion. The idea is that documenting those processes is a big deal. A lot of people have problems because they don't know where to start. So in terms of example, I touched on the government agency, all of the processes that are going on over there. If you need maybe your driver's license, car registration, house registration, whatever the case may be, but also you can take it to a different perspective and look at it from a documenting the traditions, right? We know for a fact that there are a lot of disease, a lot of aches, a lot of issues that we have in our body that could be solved and resolved by traditional medicine. So imagine you go back wherever you're from. It could be a village, it could be wherever. Find a person who is known in your community for solving this problem with traditional medicine, and you go in and document, right? So you could probably take photos. You can probably take photos or grab a camera or whatever the case may be and document those. Say, okay, if you have malaria, you go with this. If you have a headache, you use this. If you sprain your knee, I'm just throwing things out there, I don't know. But go ahead and document it, and on the flip side, turn around and start selling it to people, right? So the beauty of it is this requires almost no capital. And then the reason why I say almost no is maybe a cell phone just to be able to take photos or videos, and then boom, that's pretty much it, right? And then it's going to be obviously a lot of your time if you need to go from ministry or government agency to another, if you need to talk to people, understand what's documented, right? Or if you need to go to remote places, find a person who knows about the history, who knows about the culture, who knows about, you can also document your tribe, you know what I'm saying? Like what's specific about your tribe, the history of your tribe, or whatever the case may be, right? But the idea is make sure you go in and digitalize all of the assets that are not documented, but are so valuable and so efficient. In terms of what to watch out for, it really comes down to one thing, in my opinion. Trustworthiness. Make sure that everything you do, everything you capture and document is true. So when it comes to the procedures and the regulation, you have to make sure, one, you're always up to date, and two, you always reference the bylaw, the law, whatever, right? So nobody can go in and challenge you and say what you're saying is not true. All you have to say, hey, go back, take a look at the law number. This is what it is. This is what it says, right? So somebody like me who wants to import a vehicle into the country, I don't have to look for a lawyer to go ahead and do that for me. I don't have to go to whatever ministry. I could just go through it, look at the law, maybe do a couple of checks just to make sure it's correct, and then boom. Now, on the flip side, if you want to document traditional medicine, you want to make sure as much as possible to have testimonial, just to make sure that, you know, whatever cure we're talking about here is actually a real one, something that works. Business opportunity in Africa. Number 5 of my top profitable business opportunities in Africa for 2020 is digital marketing agency. Couple of reasons why this is my favorite. Number 1, I'm kind of biased. That's my industry. I mean, I'm in the digital space and I've been doing that for a long time. But really, the growing competition in Africa is insane. There's a lot of people go on internet today. So folks go on the internet because they want to keep in touch with their folks, no matter through WhatsApp, through Facebook, educating themselves on YouTube, and emails, obviously, etc. So the internet penetration on the continent is a serious business. The competition is great. Of course, there are still a lot of eyeballs on TV and ears on the radio, that's for sure. But imagine you position yourself today so that tomorrow, when Africa is as advanced as the West in terms of internet penetration, then you are the one, you are the reference. There's no thinking. So I just touched on some data. Now, in terms of examples, there's a couple of ways you can go about it. Obviously, digital marketing is so wide and so big that you definitely want to have a niche. But one approach that I like is really, if you can't really sell digital marketing because folks don't understand what it is or they don't understand what it does, and you should be able to answer that question, because that you should be a great salesman if you want to get into entrepreneurship, but that's a different discussion for another day. The one thing you can start off with is build that website, build a social media presence, and then you could tell them, well, now that you have a website, you need people coming into the website, right? Because otherwise nobody would know. Your best customer may not know you exist. You have a website, you attract people to the website, and then you convert them on the website, right? That's an approach that that could probably work. Another approach too is to say, hey, your social media presence is pretty weak. Let me go ahead and manage your Facebook, your Instagram, your YouTube, your whatever is the hottest thing now, right? In terms of startup costs, outside of your training and your knowledge, zero, right? All you have to do, you don't even have to have a website yourself. You could simply have a Facebook, a clean Facebook that really captures what you do. Boom, you start from it, you start going and pitching clients and telling them, okay, this is what I do, this is what I do. Hit me up on Facebook. The one thing you need to watch out for, in my humble opinion, is that selling and marketing is really regional, right? What I mean by that is that a campaign or an approach that would work in Canada may not work in Tanzania, right? As a matter of fact, a campaign that works in Morocco may not work in Senegal, for example, right? Let alone the differences between Nigeria and Egypt, for example, right? So that's one thing you may want to watch out for. You may have experience, you may know how it works, but make sure you understand that you cannot copy what you've done in the West and bring it back and build an agency, create an agency, and then paste it and say, hey, this definitely worked in London. I made a lot of money, or I've seen people making a lot of money in London. I'm sure if I take it to Kenya, it'll definitely work. So you got to be smart enough to capture those nuances. Number 6, this one is a big deal to me. So you have a lot of profitable business opportunities in Africa. Electricity is a problem that we have. Let me start off with saying that you have a lot of countries where if you don't have a generator, you could spend potentially weeks without electricity or energy, right? And that's not even a one-off, it's actually widespread. So the reason why I picked this one is simply because it's a need. Just like feeding people is a need, providing energy to folks is a need. Now, if you get into the data and trends, 1/3 of Africans don't have access to electricity. So 1 out of 3 Africans does not have access to electricity. You understand that, right? And then we are maybe 1.5, 1.3 billions today, right? So that's a big problem on the continent. Now, in terms of ways for you to turn this opportunity into a profitable business, there's so many different angles to tackle it, but from my perspective, the big one that I see here is leveraging solar, right? There's so much sun in most countries, if not all of the 54 countries, that leveraging that energy through solar panel, a battery, should be a no-brainer. I don't know why this is not popping, this is not all over, or maybe it is, but I haven't seen enough of it. There is a guy out of Tanzania, Pachingoi, who's pretty good with it. He's doing a lot of good things there in terms of solar power. You may want to check him out. I'll put the link down below. In terms of startup costs, this is a good one because I was thinking about it. I was looking at it from the perspective where if you are a good salesperson, you may not need to have a lot of capital. Maybe a showroom, having a showroom, have a place where somebody can come at you and say, hey, let me see what you have, let me see what you're doing. Because you know there's a lot of scammers back home sometimes. So you may have, spend $1,000 maybe a month just to have a showroom that establishes that you have a presence, and then start, driving traffic to you, making sure that people come to you and say, and ask you questions and really trying to engage with you from a business standpoint. But I don't think that you need to purchase 100,000, $500,000 worth of material without having a customer. It is a difficult approach, but if you do it right, I'm sure you can pull it off. In terms of the things to watch out for, I will say the number one thing from my experience, because I looked into that quite a bit in Cameroon, is support and maintenance. I'm big into giving the customer the peace of mind that if anything happens, I'll be at your door, I'll fix it, right? It's one thing to say I'm going to deliver. It's another thing to say I'm going to support you throughout the life cycle of your product, or at least for a year or two, right? Give them that comfort level that you're not just gonna, install everything and then disappear. Number 7, fashion. Man, woman, decoration at the house, decoration at the office. You've probably seen this a lot more now because African fashion is now mainstream with movies like Black Panther, or with Beyonce getting into wearing African outfits, and so many celebrities out there. It's kind of mainstream. Now, fashion as an industry is worth billions of dollars. And as far as I know, Africa does not even, probably has less than 5% of that industry. So there is still a lot to do when it comes down to it. Two examples that I have for you. The first one is Mikey out of Nigeria. She's basically worked with Michelle Obama and Beyonce. So if you're able, from a fashion and clothing perspective, to take care of folks of that magnitude, that tells you that there is some interest at that level. And then the second example is Alemo out of Ethiopia. She's basically recycled tires and turned them into a shoe brand. In terms of startup costs, this really has to do on how you set it up, right? You may want to look at it from, let me find a client first and get the order, get paid, and then start and then deliver. Or the other approach is to say, I'm just going to build my portfolio. I'm just going to have my equipment, and I'm just going to spend, maybe $2 to $3 grand, get equipped, and then look for customers. That's not my preferred approach. I always like it when people buy into your product, buy into your vision, and to the point where they're okay to give you a down payment or a deposit rather, and then from it you can go in and go deliver. So I would say the startup cost could go from $1,000 to maybe $3 to $4 grand. In terms of what to watch out for, I see two things. One, don't be a commodity, right? Make sure that you build a brand. Make sure that your brand means and represents something, because today people are not gonna buy your piece of cloth. They could go to the dollar store if that's what really they're looking for. They want to be associated with a brand that means something. Number two is, how are you going to staff up? What kind of help are you going to need? Who are you going to work with? Who are you going to hire? And how are you going to build a team to work with you? Or are you going to be a one-man or one-woman show, right? Number 8 in my list of top profitable business opportunities in Africa in 2020 is building a production company. And then more specifically focus on drones, right? Look at it from the perspective where you have a drone or a couple of drones. Let's just say you have one drone, and then you're going to approach companies and then capture their videos from a marketing styles or whatever the case may be with the drone, and really give them that pristine production. People are visual. People are looking for professional appeal in the way they present themselves, no matter if it's large corporations or small corporations. In terms of data, we know worldwide that video speaks more than photos, right? You want to make sure that you position yourself, or you position your client in a way that will differentiate themselves from the competition. In terms of example, there's so many applications. You can look at it from a entertainment perspective. You go, for example, whenever there's a big concert in your country, say MTN, brings over a major act, right? Davido, Wizkid, whoever, and they bring him over, or Fally Ipupa, and you tell them, okay, I'm going to give you a shoot of that concert from up there, right? Imagine the view, see what it's going to look like, especially if it's by the water. That kind of look is going to be a killer. Another option is talk to real estate developers, right? They do want to sell their properties, or they do want to present their property in a most professional manner to appeal to a certain, hopefully a certain kind of clientele. Another area could be agriculture, right? You can go to a farmer who has large land and tell them, hey, I'm going to help you surveil your land, surveil your farm, surveil your livestock, right? You really have to make sure that you have the equipment for it. This is slightly different, but you really want to make sure you have the equipment for it. You can go, visit them on specific schedule. Last but not least, you can also look at corporate events, right? That's really close to the entertainment we were talking about, right? You basically have a corporate event whereby, a company will take their leadership team or their team to a retreat, and then they would want to capture that. So you go in with the drone and you shoot the whole the whole thing. In terms of startup costs, I'm thinking just the price of the equipment really will be the toughest. Between $500 and $800, you could probably get an okay drone, right? And then with that drone, you start building your portfolio. You start going places and shooting, etc. Now, in terms of what to watch out for, I'll say two things. One, if you can pick a niche and say, hey, I'm only talking to farmers. This is my bread and butter right here. I don't do corporate. Or you can say, I only do entertainment, right? Whenever there's a show, no matter if it's a music, sports, whatever, your company is the go-to company. The other piece to look out for is make sure you're local, right? Make sure the event that you're shooting are really local, because that's the value that you bring. Otherwise, you can have some company who are going to say, well, I'm just going to shoot it myself and ship it out to a cheap country like China or India or Eastern Europe for them to edit it for me. You have to make sure you are local, you are authentic, and you tell your story with your production, right? That's really where the money is. It's not really the technicality of being able to shoot and to fly a drone. It's really how you turn that footage into a story that is told and that is authentic, like nobody else in another place in the world could do. Number 9, you've probably seen it if you've been to a few countries or a few cities, at least on the continent. Waste. There's a lot of garbage all over the place. There's a lot of, obviously, if you've only been to Kigali in the past couple of years, that's the only country you've been in Africa, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But everybody else has been to other places. There's a lot of waste all over the place, right? And in a lot of countries, that's a lot of money that's being literally wasted, no pun intended. In terms of data, there is an increasing amount of waste that is produced per capita. An example of how you can turn this waste into money and profit is a shoe company. I mentioned it earlier, but it's a shoe company called Soul Rebels, who is basically going to grab wasted tires from the street and turn those into soles for shoes, right? There's so many examples like that. You can also go the mobile toilets route. You get a toilet, you put it somewhere, and people pay to go and use it. It may or may not work back home where you're from, but it's working in a few African countries. So don't be underestimating people, because I can hear a few folks saying, well, in Africa, they're just going to relieve themselves on the street. Nah, man, it's not. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. In terms of startup costs, what you want to look at is, let's just say entry level. You only want to collect waste around the city. You probably need a pickup truck that could be $2-3 depending on where you are, depending on the kind of truck you want. You go in and you collect it, and then you bring it to a large, essentially, waste area that is managed by the city. Now, if you think about what to watch out for, I would probably say the number one thing is to know in the value chain of the industry or your business where you are. And number 2, pick your niche, right? See what step in this value chain you're going to be at, and then you're going to master. Because you cannot, well, you could, but in the beginning at least, you're not going to own the entire chain from top to bottom, right? So make sure you understand your value chain of your business. Make sure you understand who are the players, and make sure you pick the right area for you, where you know you have the knowledge, where you know you have a chance to beat your competition, or at least to be successful. Number 10, we're talking tourism. Build your tour guide company, or just your tour company. We've seen over the years there has been a lot of interest for Africa in different perspectives, not just fashion, entertainment, but also cultural travels, right? You have people going there because they want to connect with the culture. You have people who want to travel and get to know their continent, because you have people saying, well, I've been in the West for so long. I've been to Asia, to the Middle East, to Europe, to North America, but I don't even know back home. I want to travel more within Africa. To add to that, in terms of data and trend, you have agritourism, you have wellness tourism, and then you have adventure tourism. For example, going to a safari and stuff like that. Now, in terms of example, you can put together a tour A lot of people do that actually, put together a tool for year of return. We know what's going on in Ghana, at least what was originated by Ghana, and some other countries are looking at picking it up now. You can say, hey, for year of return 2020, I'm going to grab all of the doctors, for example, or all of the teachers, for example, or whatever niche you want to get into, and say, hey, I'm just going to grab you guys. We're going to be 150 or even 10, and say, I'll take care of everything. Our company is going to take care of your travel arrangement, airplane ticket, accommodation, going around in Ghana, going around in different cities or different countries, whatever you want to do, but really put that stuff together, because that's where, by niching down, that's where most of the large companies and most of the large tour guides, they don't even care or know, because it may be too small for them, and two, they may not be acquainted, and they may not know Africa like that. I mean, on top of it, you could also put a tour together for African festival, like Afrochella, etc. Right? That's happening. You could say, hey, if you're in Europe, or if you're in North America, wherever you're in the diaspora, you could just say, hey, there's this big event going on. I'm going to take you to this country, and then you're going to go for this event, but I'm also going to show you guys around. In terms of startup costs, really, it should be zero, right? Because the toughest part here is for you to sell your tour. It's for you to prove your value proposition. Once that's done, then you can go in and say, hey, give me X amount of dollars deposit. Then with that deposit, you can turn around and go to airlines, go to hotel, go to Airbnbs, whatever. And then, hey, I have 20 people who are going to come into the country. I need you to find me accommodation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The most critical thing here is really, really to know what you're doing and to be transparent, honest, and trustworthy. That's the number one thing here. That's essentially how you're going to have a name for yourself. Number two is, in terms of what to watch out for, you want to position yourself, right? Make sure who exactly are you trying to reach out to, who are you doing this tool for, and what is the experience that you want to give them. So it's all about positioning and experience. Now, I promise you that I had a bonus. Here's the bonus. Put together a service in the wellness industry. What I mean by that is, with the middle class increasing in numbers, with more and more people being careful and cautious about what they eat, where it comes from, what they put on, the community those goods and services serve, people do want to watch out and be careful. In terms of data now, in 2017, the wellness industry in Africa was worth about $4.8 billion, and in North America, about $214 billion, according to Global Wellness Institute. That's crazy, right? So now, in terms of example, what could you do when we talk about wellness? You can basically go the service side or the product side. On the service side, you can basically have things like spa, where you do massages and all that good stuff. Or on the product side, you can look at manufacturing natural product, cosmetics, and all that stuff, right? There's a small trend now where you have African companies coming together and say, hey, I'm just going to put together you basically have companies today that really get into that. We know a lot about the shea butter and stuff like that, but there are a lot of different products that are specific to Africa that are really praised for their natural benefits and benefit they bring to the body. Now, in terms of startup cost, it could be from, depending on where you are, the location is really important, especially if you go to service side. I'm thinking about a spa. It could be, and depending on if you lease the property, if you purchase the property, it could be around $100,000 or more. If you're on the product side, you can probably start doing it by yourself if you have the skill set for it. And that would probably be, I guess, in $1,000 to get started. What to watch out for? 3 things in my opinion. 1, the experience, because we're talking about premium services and premium product. The experience needs to be great. 2, build a brand, don't be a commodity. Make sure your brand tells a story about something that people can gravitate to. So these are my 10 plus bonus most profitable business opportunities in Africa for 2020. If I missed something, or if there's something that you see that I haven't picked up on, please let me know in the comment below.